Alright, what's going on with you guys? Welcome back to a brand new video on the channel, guys. So today I'm bringing you guys another video. We're back, and today I'm going to be talking about how to hold a conversation for those who have trouble socializing. A couple of videos ago I made a video about how to get over the fear of socializing, and this is going to be kind of going deeper into that because the idea of going up to people, approaching people, talking to people, and moving up with those goals and boundaries that I had originally spoken about may seem fine, but actually getting there and speaking is what some people may lack. And I'm here to try to supply it for you. I'm not the best person when it comes to speaking, but I know I can definitely share a couple of tips that will help you in the moment with socializing. And once again, I know for a fact these have helped me, and I want to pass them down to you guys. So I'm very, very excited to be talking about this. But before I do, if you guys are new in here, you guys know what to do. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe on the way to 1,200 subscribers. Thank you guys so much for the support recently. We're getting there. We're getting up there. So if you guys have yet to subscribe, this is the type of content that I post. I'm trying to help you out so we could both win if you just subscribe, man. Okay. My fault. But listen, let's talk about it because I really want to get into this on how to hold a conversation. Okay, so listen. The biggest thing I got to mention when going into this, the biggest thing is I want you to understand that it's all in your head. This idea of socializing, you're in your own head, and this, you're gonna probably hear it a lot of times during this video on how it actually is sabotaging you, and the idea of 20% battery, by the way, my fault again. Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry. When you get yourself involved within a conversation, a lot of the time you're just self-sabotaging, like you're having this barrier within your mind, and that is causing you to feel almost like you're lacking the idea of how to socialize and how to hold a conversation. Like you lack that idea, so you kind of fall back. It's just your mind. That's the biggest thing, and these tips are going to help you break free from that and help you push past that self-sabotage and actually hold a good conversation. And the biggest tip that I'm going to say, if you consider getting out of your own head as a tip, it's very vague, so it's going to be hard to okay, cool, I know I'm sabotaging myself, but how do I get out of that? Once again, these tips are going to help. And to follow up on the first tip that I technically said with getting out of your head, actually be interested in the conversation. A lot of times you speak to someone just because you feel almost entitled to, but when you get yourself actually caught up in the idea, you're like, oh, I don't really know, because you might not even know what they're really saying. Like, sure, you may be listening, but are you really listening? You may not be, because of the simple fact that you're in your own head. What are they thinking about me? How is my body language? Do I look good right now? Like, does it seem like I'm invested in this conversation or not? Like, you're really in your own head, and you're not really listening to what they're saying. And it may be blocking off a lot of things and opportunities for you to hold this conversation when you're constantly thinking about yourself. And this, by actually really sitting there, looking at the person and really listening to what they're saying, this is a good tip to help you get out of your mind. Number one, that's just the way it is. Sit there and okay, this is what the person's saying. Okay, really be interested. Even if you may not see eye to eye what they're saying, try your best to sit there and be maybe not interested, but I'm going to switch that and say just get invested in the conversation. You're in your own head and you're playing this game of tag in your own mind, and this is like the mirror. The person speaking to you is like the mirror of it, and you're just sitting there sabotaging yourself. You got to get out of that, and by actually being interested in the conversation, that'll help you hold the conversation. Okay? Now, this next tip is going to be a follow-up to this. So get out of your own head, and to help get out of your own head is be really interested. And a tip that will help with being interested or invested in the conversation is going to be ask questions. Take the focus off of yourself. These two, the get invested and the questions, really go hand in hand. And this is absolutely such a good tip on so many levels. Number one, who doesn't like talking about themselves? Especially if they're talking about something. Number one, if they're trying to talk to you about something that they could be proud of, you question them more about it. They're like, okay, number one, this person's interested. So I like this person more because I'm actually able to speak about myself without getting brushed off. Or if someone else goes, well, yeah, or they one up me, oh yeah, well, you did that, well, I did this more, or I did it better, or I had this much more of a rewarding situation occur to me than you did. That type of stuff. When you actually ask questions about it, they're going to be continuously talking about and what I'm assuming they want to talk to you about. It could just be small talk, or oftentimes you'll catch people talking to you about stuff that they're proud of, or something that they're kind of bragging, if you would, about, boasting about, whatever. And if you ask questions, they're going to sit there and they're going to continue to inflate it. And that's just going to subconsciously make them like you more, because if you're sitting there willing to listen to them, do it. And if there's times that you feel you can chime in to relate or share a story without seeming like you want to one-up them, do it. Because then that's actually having a conversation. But a lot of times you can just let them carry the conversation by asking questions. You're still invested, you're keeping yourself interested, and you're getting out of your own head when you just sit there and listen to what they have to say more. It's actually pretty good. And once again, that's how a conversation flows. Asking questions really helps for that reason, and they could open up new doors in the conversation. If you ask them a specific thing about this, they'll start talking about it, bring up this opportunity of conversation or this. And once again, there's going to be times where you're going to relate to it, have a story that kind of relates once again to it, that could bring that back up, that interest back up to you. It is so good. I cannot stress that enough. Ask questions about it, because when you get invested, I'm sure there's going to be some things that you feel almost like, I want to learn more about that. I want to know more about what they're saying. So, yo, what's this about? What's that about? This helps a ton. And it just helps. It just goes so hand in hand. I cannot stress it enough. And one thing that I kind of learned myself, I'm sure this tip has probably been shown somewhere. I'm sure you maybe have heard it before, but I remember finding this within myself. When it comes down to questions, you know, when you want to get people to talk more about themselves and, you know, let them carry the conversation and get invested and all this good stuff, and then chime in when you feel the need to, is like, ask them a question about a certain topic that's more in depth. If you have a hard time asking questions, because I know a lot of times I mentioned, like, ask questions, but you're like, well, what do I do? Like, how do I ask the question? Like, what questions do I ask? Once again, it's kind of natural, and I'm definitely going to say you're probably in your own head with that as well, but sometimes we have a hard time. We don't know when to chime in. We don't know when to say, yo, what's this about? We just don't. We don't know when to ask a question, and we don't know if it's a good question. Honestly, arguably, no question is a bad question if you're invested enough. That's my take, but, you know, you can portray that how you'd like. One thing that I always like to do when it comes down to asking questions is, like, whatever they're talking about, kind of like narrow it down. So if they're talking about school, ask them about classes. And if they're talking about classes, ask them about their teachers or their grades or what they're learning about. Narrow it down, and then obviously the more you narrow it down, the more specific it'll get, and the potential chance that you can relate to it more, bringing yourself to speak about it. That's very, very important. And another tip I'm going to say, this is probably going to be the final tip, because the getting out of your head is the kind of the source of it all, and it kind of stems, other tips kind of stem. Being invested, interested in the conversation, like the second biggest tip. And then the third one being asking questions, but those go hand in hand. The fourth one I said was, you know, to narrow it down, you know, ask them a question about the situation that they're talking about more specifically. That helps with getting more genuine questions out of the way, number one. And obviously there's benefits for that reason that we've already spoke about. But the final thing is, and the idea of getting out of your own head, and this tip right here, my friend actually told me this one, so if you're watching this, shout out to you, you know who you are, mentioning about not really having a filter, because we care so much about what people think about us, and we care so much about what we gotta say, and we want to please the other person a lot of times, even if you're not aware of it right away and in the moment. We just do. It's natural, and you can break free from that, and people have and people will, but a lot of times we're in our own head because we care too much about what the other person has to think. So that right there is a tip alone. Stop caring so much. You know what I mean? Stop caring so much. Like, you really gotta stop caring about these, like, the circumstances. Like, it's just a conversation. And another thing too is to understand that they're probably somewhat, maybe not as much as you could be, but they could be somewhat in their head as well about it. So the fact that if they're so in their own mind about, what am I going to say, how do I look, what is this, what is that, do you really think they have time to focus on what you got going on? Because no, they're focused on what they got going on with them. So they're not going to have a lot of time to sit there and focus on what you got going on. But you guys are both like sitting there like, oh, I'm upset, I'm worried, I'm upset about this, I want to make sure I'm leaving a good impression. If you guys are both doing that, there's going to be no judging between the two of you, because you're worried about them judging you. That's why you're in your own head most of the time. You want to people please. But they're probably doing the same thing to some level anyways. Probably. Maybe, once again, not as severe as maybe you, if you're struggling with that type of, you know, that type of aspect of the whole conversation holding thing. If you and them are both doing it, there's going to be no, like, judging, because you're going to be both in your own head. So that helped me loosen up more, because everyone is going to kind of sit there and at least be somewhat, like, conscious of what the other person thinks of them to some degree. Once again, people pleasing is a good thing, so don't try to, like, you know, be in your own head and wonder what they're always thinking about you, because that's just unhealthy to do mentally. Like, you just shouldn't be doing that. You should be you, and just, if people gravitate towards you, then appreciate them, but if not, don't waste another second trying to bring them back into your life. And that right there helps. And not having a filter when you speak just helps as well, because when you speak without a filter, you're speaking your like authentic self. It's you. This is your real self. You almost like put your walls up because you don't want them to judge you, so you'll sit there and try to speak a different way and get in your own way. And that's why, because you're not familiar with that type of talk. You're sitting there talking like, that's not how you usually talk, or you're sitting there flaunting a way you don't usually flaunt, because that's not who you are, because you care about what they think of you. And that helps. That doesn't help. That does the opposite. That completely defeats everything in the conversation. That breaks everything. When you sit there and you don't even know what you're talking about because you're not acting the way you should be, because you're caring too much about what this person thinks about you, that is the biggest barrier of them all when it comes to conversation holding. So when you release that filter, you act how you actually are supposed to act. And when you're chilling with yourself, or you're talking to a close friend and you actually are your authentic you, Do you have a hard time holding a conversation? No, you bring up whatever you want to bring up. It's just when they get more of an unfamiliar friend, stranger type of vibe, is we act someone who we are not. So drop the filter and just act like you, whatever that may consist of. And when I say no filter, obviously don't say things that are dumb. Like, you know what to say. Like, you'll be able to read the room. Don't say dumb things. You'll know what a good thing to say is and a bad thing to say. That just comes naturally. We've already been through that with just life in general. But when I say, like, don't hold the filter, I'm saying, like, don't restrict yourself off and act who you want to be. Like, be you. Don't be some desired version of who you think they'd approve of. Don't do that. And that doesn't even apply with holding conversation. That just implies with life. Like, don't do that. Be you. And that'll help. Those are some tips right there to hold a conversation. And once again, you got to pick up on the skill. You got to learn more, and that'll help you a lot. Like, genuinely, the more you do it, the more you'll be familiar about holding a conversation. You'll read different people, read how they do in a conversation setting. Like, you'll be able to understand it, and it just comes with skill. So that's it. That's just some tips right there. If you got some any questions, comments, or concerns, let me know in the comment section below. Hopefully not any concerns. I don't know why you would, but I mean, hey, who knows? Who knows what the viewer could be thinking right now? I don't know. Hopefully you're enjoying the video, and hopefully you got something out of this video. I love all of you guys. I appreciate you so much for being at the end right now. Like, it's crazy. It's an 11-minute video, and you're sitting here. I appreciate you. Thank you for dedicating that time for me all the way through. I love you for that. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.